well, let's get started. It is 8 p.m. on the East Coast. I am your host, Cynthia S. This is the Operation Code First AMA, and we're welcoming Lito Villanueva.
Hello.
And so basically, I'm just going to ask a few kind of icebreakers for folks here that don't know you. And for folks that are here or on general, you can ask either in the chat here or in Slack's general. And we have a couple of moderators that will make sure your questions get answered, so long as they don't repeat themselves. So Lito, start by telling us a little bit about who you are, how you came to Operation Code, what you do.
Sure. So Lito, I am the CEO of Lito Corp, as well as the founder of Battle Buddy. And it's a small little boutique suicide prevention technology startup. And we do a myriad of different defense-related products as a consultant and helping other entrepreneurs succeed in the defense industry. But my start in entrepreneurship was I would say riding on the coattails of my previous experience of being an engineer. And that's where it really, if you think about it from like a cost perspective, it really saved a huge amount of value to create new technology without having to like hire engineers. And I always look at it from the perspective that if you're going to college or academia, upper level academia, like you just got out the military or you're trying to do something else, take a path towards entrepreneurship, because the skills that you're gaining as an engineer, as a coder, as a developer can be used to directly make your own money or be self-employed or be an entrepreneur. So that's kind of like my angle where I take things nowadays. But back when I first started, I did not think about business at all. I was definitely like just, CLI all day, like in the weeds, just coding left and right. And I kind of missed some of the picture that I wish the things that I knew now as an entrepreneur, I could have gone back to my younger self and been like, hey, why don't you look at this? Because you're great coding, you're a great network engineer, but you'll have a much more fulfilling experience running.
So you got your skills started while you were active duty?
Yeah. So
okay.
I started just probably like many others from Operation Code who were prior military. I was a communications technician at first, like when I was in the Air Force, and it wasn't something that I sought out. It was just happenstance, because as a lot of people know, you don't know what job you're gonna get in the Air Force, and like that process is very ambiguous at best.
Yeah.
But I luckily landed a job as a network technician, and turns out like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And I made a career out of it after I left the Air Force, became a contractor overseas. And as I'd say I contracted for about 5 years altogether overseas, mostly in Afghanistan, working with the Army and then special operations, from single bases up to managing countries worth of internet and network traffic engineering. So
what got you into network engineering? Did somebody in the Air Force just say, well, you look like you'd be a good fit for this, and they just kind of shoved you at the position? Or
yeah,
did you teach yourself?
Well, so the Air Force, back when I was still in 2010, was actually when they made these changes for, like, I think it was like the year of education in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And so they had finally started including certifications in the technical school curriculum. So after you finish your 9-10 months of training, at the end of it you get like this 2-week course for cybersecurity training. And the cybersecurity training was like basic security plus from CompTIA. And I honestly thought like it didn't really have that much value. And I'll be honest, like it's a great check in the box for those entry level positions.
Mm-hmm.
But you really just want like the work experience or on job training. But what that allowed me to do is once I got out was like realize that there is an actual value to these certifications. So um, the story of how I got my first job was like, I'm out of the Air Force, like I'm gonna go look for a job. I just finished transition assistance program, like wrote my resume up, like whatever. I'm on terminal leave. I don't care. I'll figure it out in 3 months. Well, I was like, okay, 3 months later, it's like, I should probably find a job. Because stop bothering my parents.
Yep.
So
Funds are
I
running low.
yeah, exactly.
Can't eat
Uh
ramen forever.
so I get I actually text my replacement back at my shop at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base,
Yeah.
and in the comm shop I text him. I was like, hey dude, I was like I'm looking for work. You mentioned something about like overseas contracting, tell me more. And he goes, yeah, talk to this dude, we're great guys. And then I talked to this one dude, I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but he was like, hey, do you have a Security Plus? And I was like, yes. Do you have a CCNA? I'm like, what the hell is a CCNA? And
Nope.
he's like, you Cisco Certified Network Associate. And I was like, all right, let me go get that. And so it took me about 2 months of self-study,
Hmm.
of just labbing it out and then slamming my head against the books until I got my CCNA and became a network administrator straight off the bat, which I had realized like I was already doing, and like we were training for it through tech school, and I just didn't realize like the value as a infrastructure engineer, like what that would look like into the future. It's like nowadays they call it like a site reliability engineer or like infrastructure engineer, things like that. But I'm still very much like, in my eyes, like hardware uh, network engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have the two terms differentiated, or are they basically the same?
I will say like with the recent um shift, not just in the market, but within the realm of technology, it's very hard to be a network engineer without knowing fundamental higher level languages and coding. So like your Python, or well, actually it's basically all just Python or at least C++. Like if you are unfamiliar with those languages, it's really gonna be a detriment to autonomous network deployments.
Hmm.
So in Operation Code, for example, we have the channel NetDev,
Hmm.
and the idea is that you're combining network engineering and developers together under the same roof, because there is I have my own personal gripes about it, but like, to like, in all fairness, like with my personal biases aside, it is the best way to manage a network. And when I say like managing a network, I mean like the stuff that's behind me is like a network stack.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deploy all of this hardware out into the real field, into the real world, out in the field, and how do you manage all of your hardware devices? Like, and there's so many different infrastructure solutions out there, or like infrastructure as not infrastructure as service, but infrastructure management and orchestration tools out there that you can use to manage these devices. Ansible scripts, like I mentioned before, Salt Stack. Those are the only two that I really use. But like, those are what's the current state of innovation
Hmm.
in the network engineering world, and it's a lot different than some of the more um, like the introductory CS courses that you might be taking, like front end web dev or UX UI design or like behavior driven design. Like that's really more customer facing,
Hmm.
where all of the network engineering stuff is like in the
Back
back
end.
office. Like,
Yeah.
like this, the racks, the stuff that you're doing is like in those huge. If you ever
Server
seen like
rooms.
yeah, like if you ever like server rooms, like if you ever seen the show Silicon Valley, like
Yeah.
it's those data center racks. Like, that's what you're doing. And a lot of what people are trying to do is like combine all this existing hardware code that's in there with newer approaches to managing their existing what's it called, their existing like repertoire of technologies under one roof. So that like the consolidation of technology is always really hard for a large organization, and that's the same with networking. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll ask a few questions. Anybody on the line, feel free to start typing your questions away in the chat and just have them queued up. Same with on Slack. Um, I want to ask you a catch-22, because for somebody entering into the field,
Yeah.
and you're a newbie, right? You're a veteran with multiple years of experience. You may or may not have professional training or higher education. You're trying to figure out, well, I kind of like network. I'm trying to figure things out. How do you get your first job without having the education? It's like I'm noticing this trend where people are like, well, I've been told I don't have enough experience, but I don't have enough experience, which is why I need experience, and they can't get their foot in through the door.
Yes.
So how do you break through that, almost like a glass ceiling?
Oh man, this can go into so many different directions. This can go into so many different directions only because the way I did it was like was a lot. I would say a lot differently, but like it wouldn't be the advice that I would have given myself if I was doing it all over again. So, and I'll try to clarify on what I'm trying to say here. So it's hard now, you know, a decade later with all of the knowledge that I have now, and so it's hard to remember that perspective, like that whole like curse of knowledge thing. Like you don't when I was younger, or at least when I was a newbie, like you don't know what you don't know. So I was lucky. I will say that I was very, very lucky that I fell into a job that immediately complemented my skills, where I was like, you know, even as a kid, like, you know, 6, 7 years old, like I'm already on the internet. Like I already know what the world like could look like, and how just this like I was always fascinated by the internet. So it only made sense that I became like an internet engineer, and I didn't know that wasn't even a job, right? So I wasn't aware that that was something I could do, and I had realized like, oh, hey, I could make this a thing. Like I could make this into a career. It would pay really well, and it would meet, you know, all of my necessities, like making a lot of money. Like for example, like that's a pretty like basic necessity for a lot of people to still have. You know, anything like job satisfaction or like purpose or any of that. Like I don't care about all that stuff. I just need money. Like let's be honest. Like that's step one for a lot of people.
Well, that's step one when you're in your 20s and trying to figure out where you're supposed to land and what you're supposed to do. And I'm noticing too, even for vets that are older that have spent multiple years in, they're trying to find their why, right? They're trying to find their purpose. And I would say that younger vets versus older vets, if you have a pension, then the money, I mean, it's always good to make money in tech, but I'm noticing too, there's a trend between people that are like, I just need a job
Hmm.
versus I want my passion and I want my purpose.
Yeah. So we come across like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs again, like, you know, safety, food, comfort, and shelter. And it's like, well, in the society that we live in, because we live in a society, like you need cash, like you need a source of income. And for me, as you know, 20-year-old Lito, I was like, that's step one. Like let me get this, and I'll figure out the rest. So a lot of it was really just hustle. At the end of the day, I was like, you know, I was doing the same thing that I see a lot of people in our career advice doing. It was like, hey, take a look at my resume. Is it good to go? Like I'm gonna go shop this around to people I know. Like I'm gonna like send in a job application to all of the primes that I've heard of: L3, Booz Allen, Hamilton, Lockheed Martin, rate. Like, you know, I've heard of these companies in the military. I'm gonna go apply to them because they hire veterans. And I was like, okay, let me go do that. Um, and like, you know, I when I separated from the military, you get like 330 some dollars per week. um 300 of those dollars I spent on certification testing. Like I got my the first like out of the military um, certification that I got after my Security Plus was my GCIH, or my Global Information Sharing Certified Incident Handling, um, which like a lot of people had told me, like who worked in industry, was like, you need to go get this because it's the best security certifications you can get. Like, you've been doing you've been on the internet, doing scripts and all sorts of things. I'm not gonna say like I was doing a bunch of hacking, but it was like doing a lot of penetration testing, as they call it nowadays. Like, you should just take this test and you'll be fine, and then go take all of your other ones. So I was like, okay, cool. Um, because in my situation, I was like, again, I'm 20 years old. I dropped out of college already, so I didn't have a college degree. I just went straight to military after college semester, and I needed to pad my resume. And so when I was looking at it in the past, I was like, what are the minimum requirements in order for me to get a job in a company that's a contracting company, for example, to become a government contractor? Well, I needed to meet this certification, or I needed to meet this qualification, which was the DoD 8570.1M compliancy to be a quote unquote administrator. And whether you're a help desk technician, a service desk technician, or a network architect, you have to follow this guideline. And this is changing as we speak. But back in the day, especially for a lot of back end administrative stuff, or comms stuff, or S6 or N6 A6 work, like, you needed this. And I kind of just followed that path. And again, it's like I was doing like a lot of market research. Like, I looked on like security, like clearancejobs.com. I was like, hey, if you have security clearance, if you have these certifications, if you have X amount of years of experience, here's how much money you can make. And it's like north of $150,000. And I was like, let me just do that. So
Yeah, you definitely sounded like you did your research for sure.
yeah, that was the first thing. It was like, um, I'm definitely like on the front end of things, like very lackadaisical, but like, I do a lot of research on the back end because I want to make sure that I have um, I'm going down the right path, and then I just kind of like followed in the footsteps of
Mm-hmm.
people who came before me, before I kind of branched out into my own when I was 6 years later, when I'm 26,
Yeah,
to go into the path of entrepreneurship.
cool. We have some questions.
Sure.
So Tim's got some questions from Slack, and then Peter has some questions here in Zoom.
Okay.
So go for it, Tim.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So first question for you, Lito, is how did your mindset change going from the military to a civilian job world? That's the first question. I have no one after that.
Oh man, this is hard. Um, well, hmm. So let me caveat by saying my dad was a drill instructor. So it didn't really change all that much.
I feel sorry for you, kid.
Yeah. So so this is why I'm like really like super chill, like when it comes to like military stuff. And then like in quote unquote the civilian world, it's like, okay, I know how to like operate within the world of people who haven't been institutionalized into the DoD. Which is like this weird duality of like almost as if like there's like so I hired an intern who's prior Navy, right? And it's like I'm a lot more chill because there's like all these expectations that I know can already be met, like the basic things, like taking out your trash, like cleaning up after yourself, or like like keep me updated on the things that are going in terms of workflow. Whereas in the civilian side of things, it's almost frustrating all the time. It's frustrating all the time because you're like, I have to like get this out of this person, and it's kind of like being a parent, really. And I realized uh, when you're running the way I run my startup, or is very similar to how I've seen other leaders in the military, the good ones. We all have had shit leaders, but like the good leaders that I've met and have had the privilege of working for, they set up their environment in such a way where it's very, very inclusive of the ideas. Yes, there is still rank and there's still authority, but it, when it comes to ideas and like problems and who needs to be the champion of an idea or a product or a line, like you leave it to them. You leave it to them, and you trust your troops to get that done for you. Is it different? Yes, but you kind of need that in your organization. And I always think of it as like, there's a reason why the commander in chief is civilian and not a military person, and you need that level of empathy and understanding, and realizing that your employees and the people that you work with are human beings. They're not just property. We very much like to think that military service members are property. As you sign your life away, you're technically property of the U.S. government, but you are also, there is a person underneath that uniform, and you have to be aware of that. So like, and the best example, like I said, is I hope I would have wanted to Bill still be like sitting right behind me, but he has his own goals, and he has a budding relationship with someone who he truly loves and would like to not be long distance, and I'm completely understanding of it. And for us, like, logistically speaking, it's not the first time we've done remote work, and for like the past 2 years before this year, we were already remote, so it wasn't like a huge change in our tool or in our flow. But you kind of have to understand that there are some needs that we have as human beings that you have to account for. And the only thing that I try to hearken to from the military world versus the civilian world is like, please tell me what you want, because I can't read your mind. And I think that's something like the military has instilled. It's like, tell me that what the problem is and what you need, or when you're going to take leave. Like, don't like make me fish it out of you, or like, don't let me know. Don't let me find out until it's too late. So that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Peter, do you have a question?
Yes. So what did you wish you knew before you started your business?
Where the money was going to come from. Let's start there. I definitely forgot the core tenet of starting a business, which is, I looked at it from a very wide-eyed, I'm going to change the world, just like every other entrepreneur was. Like, I'm going to change the world. Everybody's going to love this idea. We're going to save lives, and we're going to protect our military service members through suicide prevention technology, and then realize that there's no market for it. Or if there is a market for it, you don't know how to sell it. And if you do know how to sell it, how are you going to create it? How are you going to find the talent and the team to execute on this dream? So a lot of that, again, was just like, there's a lot of books that I had read before I first started. Like the 4 Steps to Epiphany, Disciplined Entrepreneurship, the business, like Business Model U, Business Model Generation, even like the class, like 0 to 1, whatever. But sometimes you skip those things until you unfortunately come across those problems firsthand, and you're like, crap, these were like problems I should have avoided because I read about them. But it inevitably happens. You got to fire people, you lose money, you run out of your own funding, there's no market, you have to come up with a new product, or build what the customer wants. And a private conversation that I had with another mentor, I was talking to him because he's been a successful entrepreneur in the past. I was like, did you ever come across this problem where like, what the customer needed, but what they're buying isn't what they need? it's what they want. And he was like, oh man, I can talk to you for hours about this, where the customer wants this, or they think they want it. So you have to go build that for them and then deliver underneath it all what they really need. Um, and I think that's what really I learned when I not 3.5 years later, after being an entrepreneur for this long, was um, the humility one is like, because you really cannot be stubborn with the market. Like, you can be stubborn about your vision and what the future could look like, but definitely the how you get there needs to constantly change. It needs to move left and right and up and down and all over the place.
I was going to say, if you were going to be
survive.
flexible, you had to be flexible this year in 2020, because I mean, I think the pandemic's just thrown everybody a curve, even the tech industry where we think we're safe.
Yeah. I just got off the phone with an entrepreneur yesterday who was like, I was getting ready to scale everything up. Like, I had funding lined up, I had a team lined up, I had a COO lined up, I had a tech lead, and then March hit, and everything shut down. And I was like, dude, that sucks. For us, we were in this like really strange place where we had uh, non-dilutive funding through government contracts for prototype research and development. So we were like afloat. And if anything, it was kind of just like, for us, it was just like a break. It was really just like a sigh of relief, like, whew, like, let's step back for a week while the world figures things out. And this was in March. And then let's like re-hone what we have to do, because our cash burn rate was so low. It was only me and Bill. We didn't we were prototyping a live version of our product so that we can actually deliver it to our customer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, we had a couple of other customers that had to drop out too because their funding had dried up. But there were still a couple of different entrepreneurs and small businesses where they looked at it just like we looked at it. Was like, yo, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. Like, all these guys are falling. All these giants are broken, out of money. They're way too leveraged, and they have to grind to a halt. And the small businesses can basically just like rise up and just be scavengers.
Yeah.
And that's how we've been able to survive.
Cool. Tim, you got another question?
Yeah, I got one more for you, Lito. So here's a
Sure.
question from one of our viewers tonight. What should someone that's transitioning start thinking about their future in the civilian world? When do you think that should happen?
I say this all the time. I say this like all the time in career advice, especially like you can hear it in someone's voice when they're typing. It's like, like, I'm going to do this and do that. And like, and I'm like, what do you really want? That's the first step. What do you really want? Like, what do you want in life? What do you want for your job satisfaction? What do you want for your day-to-day activities? Because that will really, it's a simple question, but it takes a bit of answering, because you're like, what do I really want? Well, I want to be happy. And they're like, okay, well, how do I get there? And then from there, it's like, okay, what do I want from a job? Or what do I want from a career? And when you think about your day-to-day tasks, like, do I want to be a person that sits at my computer all day and types and fixes problems? For some people, that's like the best thing that they could ever do. I was definitely like that for a long time. I still am. Or do you want to be, customer facing and like walking around and seeing people, or would you rather, are you more attuned with lines of code, thousands of lines of code, or talking to people? And that's where, you try to figure that stuff out for yourself, and kind of answer your own question. And for me, again, it's like the difficulty moving from being a tech or being an engineer into entrepreneurship and like putting the leadership hat on was like, it's been so long that I've written a line of code. like I did yesterday for some homework, just like to help, you know, my girlfriend out.
Mhm.
But you know, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, but it's one of those things. What was his name? Um, he's the author of the book Getting Things Done, and he was talking about like, and there's also this book called The CEO Within, and they talk about the zone of excellence and the zone of genius. And the zone of excellence for me is like coding and engineering, and I'm really good at it, and I could do this for a career, but it doesn't wake me up every day. It's not like I'm whoa, I'm ecstatic about it. Whereas my zone of genius is like entrepreneurship is like when if you ever look at me like in my day-to-day routine of entrepreneurship, I do not look like a pinnacle. Yeah, thank you, David L. I do not look like the pinnacle of what an entrepreneur is supposed to look like. I roll my ass out of bed and I'm like, oh God, another day, you know, already like by the time I wake up, I'm already on my phone messaging out whoever I need to for business. But I get up. That's a that's like that was like the difference is like with coding, I hated it. Like when I'm tired, when the problem was too hard and I couldn't figure out, I'm just like, you know, screw it. I'm gonna leave.
So that's the thing. That is you said something before. You
Yeah.
said when you're a newbie, you don't know what you don't know. And that's exactly, I had a mentor that told me that when I was starting out in the media field. You
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know. And which means the possibilities before you haven't even fathomed it. And you need to start asking yourself hard questions, and you need to challenge yourself, because when you're not challenged, you're not growing. And that's it. There really is no linear path, you know, for each individual. Like, people come to Operation Code, they ask mentors, but we can't tell you what they should do. We can only tell you our journey and what we've done in our journey to do it. We can help people and say, hey, do you want to learn how to code? But there is no prescription for, hey, learn this and learn that. And the majority of the front end devs that I've seen, it's like there's so many people that have concentrated on front end because they were told, well, no, you got to learn this first.
Mm-hmm.
And they never had somebody that really walked them through what is a database engineer, what is a network engineer. And so that's why we're having these AMAs too, because I want people to explore in a safe place where you're not having to spend money. I mean, if you want to go learn the code, cool. But sometimes you can just ask somebody their own experience and figure out, well, I might like that too, and I might
Mm-hmm.
explore it, you know, and you don't know until you get there.
Yeah. So I'll try to bring it back here a second. So like with network engineering, like I can talk for hours, like literally weeks about network protocols and EIGRP and OSPF and state machines and Dijkstra algorithms and dual algorithms and route maps and QoS and quality of experience, like and we get into like network sciences, which there's only like one school that has a degree for it, but like it's still very fascinating to me, and like I could literally get sucked in and absorbed into it if I really wanted to. The problem again is that at the end of the day, I know that it's not something I it's just not something that gets me up every day. You know, it's something that I like to ponder and I like to think about, and I like to talk with a lot of other engineers over about like the theoreticals and things like that. But it doesn't. It's like it's just very hard to explain where I can't be like.
Well, like, you've evolved, your
Yeah,
skills have evolved, and you
my skills have evolved, and like I've you know I reached this point, like I'll put it another way. I reached this point in my career where I did it all. Like I did what could possibly like basically be everything that there is to do about network engineering, and then at that point I was like over it. So I was like, what can I do now? Because I'm having these problems that aren't related to necessarily the tech industry, like the technical portion of network engineering anymore. now the problem that I was facing was that this was a people problem. This was an issue. Like this was a policy problem. This was a problem with the implementation of technology, not how the technology would work.
Mhm.
So again, like myself with a group of network engineers and system engineers and system architects engineered literal countries worth of traffic through the internet. And when you get to see it at that level, you're like, well, what's next? What's next, and why are things still so bad in the technology world? And I was like, I can't pinhole myself into just being an engineer. I needed to be a leader in the business world if I wanted to get my goals through, which was eventually to implement newer technology like we're doing now. Like we're still a tech company. But I had realized like all of the other things that came with entrepreneurship, whether it's selling or hiring or recruiting or managing the budget or finding investors or like balancing quote unquote work life with your partner as well as the business, whereas the business is basically your child, and it's like an adoptive child, like you're trying to
Yeah.
raise and grow to stand on its own. And the constant level of difficulties that you face at every single junction, and I like to say this to a lot of other veteran entrepreneurs that we come across, is like, dude, I've had 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and in many other places with black sites. Like we've done a bunch of crazy stuff, and this, like, entrepreneurship is still harder than all of that because it's a different level of skills. Like
Mhm.
like I said, it's what gets me up. Like when I roll out of bed, I look like shit, but in my head I'm alive, I'm engaged. And anybody that knows me, I'm like, you talk to me about anything about business, I will like be there. If you want to talk to me about networking, I'm like, sure, like we can talk about it and I can train and advise and mentor.
That's
But
not what gets you excited.
that's not what gets me excited. Like entrepreneurship, I'm like, let's go. But again, like I wake up and I'm like, but I'm up, like I'm
Yeah.
up and I'm there.
I get totally what you're saying, because I've had to
Yeah.
go through that. And one of the things that I've found in my experience as a founder is what's
Mhm.
scary and thrilling at the same time is not knowing, is the not
Yes.
knowing. And then you're at a challenge and you almost hit an impasse and you've got to find a solution, whether
Yes.
that's a client where you're dealing with a challenge you've never seen, whether it's you've reached a level of your technology skills where all of a sudden things are evolving and you've got to find that R&D. You've got to be your own R&D. You've got to
Yeah.
figure out that next approach. And to me, it's not about the competition. It's me competing against me. I
Yes.
don't look at anybody else. But that's the scariest thing, is waking up and going, oh my gosh, what if I wake up and I just can't one day? What do you ever have those moments where you just wake up and get paralyzed, where you're like, what if I can't figure out a solution to whatever this next problem is going to be, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's, find a deal with a difficult client.
Well, so I think this comes into like a lot of what and this relates maybe not even just to entrepreneurship, but again, as we've talked about previously, like the whole like transition process from active duty or military life into your new field is like, am I really this person? Like the whole like imposter syndrome um, is something that a lot of people have come across. I've come across it previously, but I'm kind of weird where like I kind of just don't have anxiety. Like I have other problems, don't get me wrong. Like I just try to kill myself, but like anxiety or self-doubt was not something that I had. I just like, no, I know eventually I'm going to get it done. Because I really just, I really don't compare myself to anybody. I do compare myself to myself. Like, what were you yesterday? Or what were you a week before, a month before, a year before? And that's the only thing that I think of. But it was never one of those things where like, I've never thought in my head like, oh, I'm gonna fail. Like there's never been a point where I'm like, I'm gonna fail. Like the only thing I know is like, as I told a lot of other people before, is like, if I just get one thing done every day, just one, I don't care what it is, but like one work related thing done every day, then I'm in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're like in a low energy mode, or like you're feeling depressed, or you're feeling like nothing's going right in your business, in your life, or otherwise, if you just get that one thing done, then you'll be okay. Like it'll be okay eventually. Maybe not right now, because the world is shitty, and you don't know where everything's going, and you have nihilistic existentialism because you're a psychopath. I don't know, but like you're like
This
not
conversation is getting
sure.
really deep.
Yeah, like, well, like it really does. Like you really like start to think about all of these things, um like
Why are we here?
yeah,
I've
like
had those
why are we
conversations with
here?
myself. Like, why
Yeah,
am I
why are
doing
we
this?
here? Why am I doing this? Why do I need this job? Like, is this going to make me happy? And again, like I like to start off like with the question that was asked before, is like, for people who are just starting out, what should I think about? And the one thing that you should think about is, how do I survive? Like, how do I survive? And that's fortunately getting a job, getting money. But all that other stuff is just as important later, like
Mm.
work-life balance, purpose, finding something to do, that fills you with excitement and passion and fulfillment. And
I have a
unfortunately,
question, a founder
yeah,
question. I'm going to
yeah,
dig deep here because I
okay,
don't think I have another founder on my list
okay,
of SMEs. When I first met you, you said read this book, and it's called Dating an Entrepreneur or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What is it like to be a founder and to do what you do? That's time consuming, and you don't have regular work hours, right? Sometimes you have to answer clients. They're all over the globe, different
Yeah.
time zones. How do you make that work with the personal life? Or is there a personal life? Is your personal life
There,
part of your work life?
yes, there is a personal life, and there is, and I would consider this to be a uh, a grave false assumption that entrepreneurs cannot have a balanced life. And even like even like the billionaires of the world, like Mark Cuban, for example, are like, there is no life portion of it. And I'm like, well, I've spoken to a couple of other billionaire family offices, and they look like they've been, husband wife team, like they've been working pretty well together for 45 years now. Like I think they know what they're doing. And uh, first off, like my current life partner is like the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like, it was not something that I sought out, but because it happened, like I'm very grateful for it. And I don't think I could have gotten this far, like as an entrepreneur, in the past year without her. So I'm very, very thankful. But it is a very important conversation to have. And we're in a stage in our lives where we're both very much focused on growth, like career growth, and personal growth. And making it work is is really is really good for us, because we're trying to figure ourselves out too. So it's not something like where we can be like, hey, I'm solely focused on this, like, of my work, and like this is
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that's important for me. Like, no, it's like, look, hey, you are very much a huge portion of my life, but we are complex creatures. Like, I'm here to support you, and I'm thankful that you're here to support me. You know how crazy work can be, and I'll have to like fly to Georgia or North Carolina or Ohio for work. And like today, I was like, I have to be up until 8 a.m. and then go to sleep and then do this. Like, there's just work that gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a conversation that you can have that is all about clear lines of communication, compromise, and knowing how to prioritize that in the best ways possible, whether that's through dedicated date nights or dedicated calendar blocks to for no work. um, and we adopted like this one tactic of life dinners, like monthly life dinners, so that we can just
Nice.
like catch up. And that really helps out to kind of like reorient ourselves and how are things doing, and like we can, it's kind of like a after action review of our like relationship. I was like, what was good, what was bad, what was, what needs improvement, and what has been going well so far. And that just like really just helps us out. And like a lot, like, again, just like everything that we do is aligned towards this mission of like being together. Like, that is our goal. It's just those day-to-day tactics are really hard sometimes. But again, like, Entrepreneurship, as you know, like within like our founder circle, is a very lonely road.
Mhm.
And if you can find somebody who can like support that entrepreneurial vision, then again, that's why I was like, Bill, like I totally understand you wanting to be closer to your partner because you also need that emotional support. Like it's totally fine with me. Like I get it, not a big deal. We'll budget it out logistically, economically, and technologically. Like
Mhm.
it'll be fine. But I know that it is very important, and you can't just ignore those human factors.
How important is the ability to adapt to remote work right now? I mean, like
Oh,
everybody's remote, but I mean, there are traditionalists that insist on going into the office, right? And if I can't see you, then you're not working. How do you manage your business and the culture of people working?
well, so personally, that's still hard for me. So like, if I see an intern or if I see like my past employees, like playing video games, like in my head, I'm like, I'm like you could be doing something, and then I realize like, no, that's not fair because I'll be doing that too. Like, pop a squat, go play some Call of Duty or like play Valorant or something, and we'll just hang out. So it's really not fair. Um, this is one of those counterintuitive things where you cannot use your judgment as a human being. You really have to be metrics based and objectives based on this, where it's like, did this person say what they were going to do on time every single time? Like, I'm going to accomplish this product roadmap feature, I'm going to accomplish reaching out to this client, I'm going to accomplish following up with this. And as long as they've done all those things, like, what can I really complain about? Like, they did their job. And as I look at it in the past, again, this is like we pivoted from our old company to this one. um I had seven other employees that I all had to let go because at the end of the day, work wasn't being done, and it was just unsatisfactory work. So I again, you kind of have to, like, as that CEO or that thought leader or that executive, you really do have to be a bit of a sociopath and take your emotion out of the equation and take your own personal biases out of it, and then just like look at the objectives that you had set out for your employees. Like, did you write the code that you needed to do? Did you figure out the next steps and the viable solutions?
Mhm.
Did you do the research? Was this person technically technically able to accomplish the work? And if it was yes to all of those, then perfect. You have nothing to complain about whatever they do day to day. If it's a no, that's when you have problems. And unfortunately, I came across a lot of no's with my early employees.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a line between providing professional development, and then saying, okay, how can I mentor you, challenge you, be the leader that you need to be the best that you can do. And for me, it was really tough when I first became a team lead,
Yeah,
and there were some difficult decisions to make. And I'm always the type of person that wants to give people the benefit of the doubt.
yeah,
Like, what can I do to help you? And then it got to the point where I'm like, I'm doing everything for you that, you're not meeting the standards or the client, or I'm like picking up extra work. I'm having to do like 80 hours a week because so-and-so dropped the ball. And then I had to learn real quick, like boundaries.
yeah.
But I'm going to ask the question that I think is on every newbie's mind, which is, what if I'm not good enough? So what if they get the job, right? And they get a job in the field that they're like, I'm really excited about. I've been waiting for this day to come for years. I've trained for this. And then you hit a problem. You hit a problem, whether it's code or some sort of issue, or it could be human issues. You're not getting along with somebody on the team, or you have a boss that doesn't know how to communicate with you. You run into another impasse, and
Mhm.
then they question themselves and go, what if I'm not good enough? And that fear of failure keeps you from moving forward. What do you say to people that are kind of stuck in their mind?
Well, I fail every single day, so that's not a problem. Like, again, like entrepreneurship is like getting punched in the face every day. Um, you kind of, um, like after a while, like you realize like your day-to-day failures aren't like your big like career failures. Like um it's almost like you ever go to like you ever hear like newbie lifters who are like, I don't want to go to the gym because I don't want to get too big, and like that that's not really possible. And it's almost like the same way with people who are attempting like a new career field. It's like, "Oh, I don't want to feel like failure," and it's like, well, you can't really fail until you absolutely give up, because especially in like the tech community, like everybody knows like and let me start off by saying like the things that like newbie coders don't understand, like whether you're having a computer science degree or an EECS degree, is like you have literally the sum of human knowledge available to you on the internet to assist you in work. Okay, like in the real world, like when you're out there like and you have a job as a developer, you have access to the internet. Like you're not going to be doing some sort of like code code interview challenge where you have zero access and you have to like funnel things out through your headspace. Like, is it good to have it? Absolutely. You should be able to pull relevant uh, reverse binary trees up in the best sorting algorithm. Sure, great. But and once you get past that hurdle and you actually get into your job, I'll tell you a story.
Story
It'll
time,
probably,
yay.
yeah, this will be the best way to demonstrate how I felt and how others may feel about this. So when I was first interviewing for the job that I got, for an unnamed company, but they were paying me again north of $150,000, and I was like, this is crazy. Um, my interview happened on a Saturday. I was It was noon. I was still in bed, obviously. I'm 20 years old. And some guy calls me. I think his name was like Ishmael or something. Some guy calls me at noon on a Saturday from Kuwait and said, "Hey, this is so and so from such and such. You ready for an interview?" And I was like, "Absolutely." 90 minutes later, I'm neck deep in not knowing what the fuck any of his questions were, like by the latter half of it, because I was already so mentally taxed and exhausted. But I scraped through, and I didn't think anything after that, because I was like, there's no way I got this job. Like, that was probably the worst interview of my life. Like, and I interviewed at like Intel too, and I was like, oh, like I did pretty okay. But even Intel didn't call me back, and I was like, all right, whatever. Like, screw that. All right, so
Bitter?
not really. I don't really care. I didn't want to work there anyway. But like, I was like, okay, um, there's no way like I got this job anyway. Like a week later, I get an offer letter sent. I immediately sign it. No questions asked, because like it was ridiculous on how much money they were giving me, and that's all I cared about then as a young 20-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So, and I go through my in processing. I go through my pre-deployment stuff in Indiana. I go to Kuwait to meet the leadership team of a U.S. company, but they have a Kuwait office. Immediately get sent over to Kandahar, fly through the Black Hawk to the base that I need to be at, and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm here. Like, now what do I do? And I get the rundown the first day there. I get the rundown of the whole technology stack. Everything was like a whirlwind. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then the next day, after I catch up on my sleep and like get acclimated to the time zone, I'm like, all right, what do I need to do? And they were like, oh yeah, I need you to create a printer VLAN. And I was like, done, like in less than 5 minutes. I was like, cool, that's
Nice.
it. It was like, I realized like there was nothing scary about the real world at all. And like for a lot of other people, again, like it's like going through college and like taking all these really hard advanced math courses, and the next thing you know, you're an accountant, and most of the things that you're doing are adding and subtracting and a couple of different multiplication and division and turning them into percentages and making them into a pretty little bar graph. Like
Yeah.
you're not trying to find area under the curve of a line. Like, it's not that bad.
I think the fear is mostly the fear that we fear itself is the only thing that's stopping us, right? Like we're literally worried about the impossible thing when actually it's like training. When you go to field training, when you go, when you're in the military, you go to training like it backwards and forwards. You disassemble your weapon backwards and forwards, because when you're in the moment, you deploy, you go, and all that training kicks in. And I found that to be very true. The more I practiced, the more I pushed myself, the more it became rote memory. When I was confronted with a problem, almost like, hey, I've done this before. This isn't so scary. I've done something similar. And even if there's a problem, you find a creative solution for it that's based on a previous problem that you had.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, right?
Yeah.
Is what they say. Like I look
That
at
was the
things
quote.
mostly. Yeah, there's mostly, again, I look at it mathematically, like for a lot of people, like, again, like civilian, like when I was like, hey dude, like if you want a job making over $100,000, like come talk to me. Like you just need X, Y, and Z, and like what do I get out of it? I get like a $1,500 referral bonus, no problem. But like they were like, oh my god, like you're in a war zone and like there's mortars and stuff, and I was like, yeah, like 1 in a 55,000 chance of getting more. There's no, like, they don't have any thermal guidance. Like what the hell? They're just bombs. And I was like, the chances of getting hit and then dying, like in a car, is a lot greater, like in your day-to-day life in the United States. So I was like, screw it, I'm gonna go overseas. Like I'm just like, in terms of the numbers, I'm like, okay, I know what is successful. I know the probabilities of success, and I kind of just like listen to the math. Again, like the difference between what is probabilistically viable as an engineer, and when you're doing things by the numbers, versus essentially doing things based on stubbornness or grit or faith, or just this belief in yourself, like that is not that is unquantifiable. That's kind of why I went down the path of entrepreneurship, because I know the statistics. I know what the failure rate is versus the cushy, amazing life that I'm living as an engineer, and like how on paper I looked like a pinnacle of success. And like, why would you just throw all of that away and go into the path of entrepreneurship? And this boils down to that what do I really want? Like, what do I really want to do with my life?
I'm going to find out if there's any last questions for Lito, because we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. So like it again was one of those, like, I need to know, I need to find myself and figure out what I wanted to do for my life. And I don't think being an engineer was the end state for me. I wanted to do something a little bit more. It was a great, like, I needed that base, I needed that foundation. But now that I got business on my mind, it's just something that I can't stop thinking about.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in your journey, and hopefully we'll have you speak again in a non-pandemic format.
That'd be
thanks
great.
Everybody for attending. I will be posting this on our YouTube channel for folks that just came in late or missed it. So thanks for participating. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye.